Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 33 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined in person by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Good evening, college football fans.
Yes, and happy holidays to all of you. We are actually recording this late on Christmas Day, Christmas night, I guess you would say, December 25th, and we're doing our pre-bowl game discussion for the New Year's Six and the college football playoff games, as well as the upcoming UCLA-Nebraska game. What's the bowl called?
It's called the Foster Farm Bowl.
The Foster Farm Bowl. All right, so we're going to be giving our breakdowns and predictions on all of those games. But before we get into that, we have to do as tradition and crack a cold beverage.
Yes, nice cold beer that we can enjoy together rather than being so distant.
That's true, yes. This is kind of nice because
back home again.
Yeah, the early podcasts, during the summer, we were together. We were able to do these in person, and we had to do the Skype while I was in LA, but I'm back for a couple, about 10 days or so here to hang out with the fam, so we get to do these in person, which will be fun.
Yes.
All right. So we'll dive into the meat of the show first, the UCLA-Nebraska game. And let's just talk a bit about what's happened since the last time we've podcasted in terms of both teams, preparations, players coming back from injury, what the indications seem to be. I know that the spread for the game is minus 6.5 in UCLA's favor for this game. Right.
And as far as the game is tomorrow night, December 26th, late night, but only game at that time frame, and it's on a Saturday night, so hopefully it'll get a fairly good number, and especially with a couple of schools like Nebraska and UCLA, a couple of traditional schools that didn't have great years, but sure enjoy playing each other, have some history together. So all of those things make for it being a kind of an interesting game. But as far as Nebraska's readiness for the game, I think it's very up in the air in trying to gather data from the reports from practice of the various news media outlets. I have gotten kind of a conflicting message, to be honest with you. I have gotten indications that the guys are really focused and ready to go, and health-wise, other than one of our linebackers, Marcus Newby, we are fairly healthy, except for those that are gone for the season. So from a team health standpoint, we're in great shape. But I believe that's true also for UCLA in terms of injuries that were recoverable, if you will. Now, they have some major losses that they had, much like we did throughout the season, where those players obviously are not going to be back in time for the game. His name is escaping me right now from UCLA. Jack is his last name. He was a jack of all trades, pardon the pun, but he was, I think it's Miles Jack. But the bottom line is he is not going to be back for the game. Additionally, one of the great areas of concern for UCLA is their offensive line. They have just had a number of weird injuries, season-ending type injuries. They've also had some departures. They had a starter, I think he was a guard or like their right guard, quit the team and decided to go pro early, signed a contract with an agent, and immediately started preparing for, Senior Bowl the
combine.
Basically preparing for the NFL draft, and so he left the team. So they are very thin on the offensive line at UCLA.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because you were talking to me yesterday about how there have been some odd signs from the team in terms of some of the seniors, and some players not being as all in, both for this bowl game and for Riley in general. We've heard some rumors about how, there were some people on the team who were still kind of in the Bo camp, and weren't ready to make the Riley transition.
Right, and throughout the season that has been an area of question, and I think there certainly is some validity to that. I don't know how much that translates to how they performed on the field, but I definitely know that there are some issues like that, and frankly, on any team, even championship teams, you can't have 120, 130 people together for that long and not have some people and personality conflicts between players, between coaches and players, between coaches and coaches. Those are all parts of the dynamic of a football team.
Oh, yeah. But what I was bringing up was that in terms of the guys being ready to go to this game,
right.
My perspective is that the people on the team should be overjoyed because we're lucky to be even in a bowl game with a 5-win season. Mm-hmm. And not only that, we ended up going to that Detroit Bowl that we thought we might be going to. Instead, they're going to San Francisco to play,
right.
which is
UCLA. And, yeah.
Right, which is much more prestigious, and a cooler place for the players to go visit and all of that. So on all those accounts, it's a more enticing prospect than some of the others we had. Now, in terms of the difficulty of our opponent, that's also increased.
Right.
UCLA is definitely going to be a tough team to beat, but I don't see why they shouldn't be excited.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but yet, again, you don't always know what's going on with the team, and like I said earlier, the reality is that there seems to be some mixed messages coming out of the media, that follows the Huskers. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that same inconsistent message has what I've read from the UCLA media. They seem to also be a little all over the map in terms of what they expect from the UCLA squad.
But the difference is, in my mind, they're an 8-4 team,
right?
So they were preseason expected to be better than they were. So I could understand a little bit of disappointment amongst their staff. And certainly we expect to be better earlier in the season too. We expect to have a 5-win season. But we should be happy to be going to a bowl game at all, whereas they're probably a little disappointed they didn't get to go to a better bowl game.
Right. No, I agree with you. And the bottom line is, are the players ready to play on that night? Because so much of a bowl game is about attitude.
Right. And one thing that kind of goes against Nebraska's favor is that for UCLA, it's essentially a home game, given that it's, mere hours away from where they live, my town. So that's definitely a disadvantage for Nebraska in terms of the fact that it's essentially an away game for us and a home game for them.
Right.
Kind of like the constant times Miami and Nebraska played in the Orange Bowl.
But I would suggest to you, given the fan base of Nebraska fans in the state of California and the number of folks that will travel anyway, even though it's a lesser bowl, I think you will find that there's probably going to be about 40% Nebraska, 60% UCLA. I don't think it's going to be an overwhelming UCLA crowd.
Right. That's true, because I can attest there are quite a few Californians for Nebraska out there.
Yes.
So talking just about kind of the schemes of the teams in general, I'm trying to recall back because I actually got to go to one UCLA game in the Rose Bowl, which was cool to see. It was the Arizona State game, I believe, which they ended up losing. But I recall them having a running back that was really good, that he didn't have many breakout plays in that game, but the couple that he did have, he really shined.
Right. They have overall great team speed, both sides of the ball, and a lot of athletes, all over the place. But like I mentioned earlier, their biggest issue right now, I think, is depth and the ability to have any kind of rotation that they are confident in with regard to their offensive line. And so if we're going to have an advantage, it's going to be in the area of getting, a good push from our defensive line and really shut them down and make them kind of a one-dimensional team, not let them do what they want to do. And if Nebraska can accomplish that, we'll be in great shape. And that leads to another one of the pre-game issues that has been all over the Nebraska media, which is, of course, both of our defensive tackles are guys that were highly regarded going into the season. Both of them, one of them had a very poor season statistically because he was injured for a great deal of the year, but he's still the kind of big body that the NFL cherishes. And so there's still a reasonable amount of speculation that he may seriously consider going pro, as will Malik Collins. That's Vincent Valentine. And then Malik Collins is a guy that everybody has been all over from the very beginning of the season, that he was one of the better defensive tackle prospects coming out of college football. Now, he did not have a spectacular year this year, partially because of the transition to a new defense, learning the schemes, all that sort of stuff, and what they were asking him to do. But he still showed flashes of explosiveness where it's obvious he's got NFL potential. The question is it in his best interest to wait a year or go now? And so with all that circling around, the question is, what kind of defensive line player are we going to get from our front four? If we have a good effort from those guys and they want to showcase themselves and they play within the scheme, I think we have a chance to do well against that offense.
See, I think you get those situations where like a guy wants to kind of save his body, in the bowl game.
Right.
But I think that only really happens with guys who like are really good and
already established.
Yeah, they already know they've got their ticket to the NFL. Or are very confident in the fact that they've performed well enough in the season. With both of these guys, I agree with you. I don't think their season numbers are that great. So to have a late game, explosive series, I think would benefit them. So I would hope that means that they will play with heart tomorrow.
Right, I agree.
What I was going to bring up is that I agree with you because of UCLA's offensive line issues and how our defense of play has improved over the course of the season. I think that side of the ball will hopefully be under our control. What I'm more concerned about, based off of the last game we got to see, the Iowa game, defense was overall quite good throughout that entire game. But then Tommy Armstrong obviously making all those mistakes cost us that game big time. So has he, been working over the course of these past couple weeks and watching that game film to try to rectify some of those poor decision makings and the bad throws, and all that? Or because if we get a repeat of the Iowa game, we lose this game possibly badly.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any question about that. So a lot depends on how he comes to play that day.
I absolutely agree. I think this game, very much from a Nebraska standpoint, if we have a path to victory, it is through Tommy Armstrong having a very good football game. If Tommy continues to be the bad decision maker that he has been for a good portion of this season, then we are likely going to be on the losing end of this game.
Yeah.
It comes down to that. Because I think the other guys will all come to the table. I expect them to play hard, all those things to be good, But what happens in terms of ball security and good decision making, those are the critical elements for us.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about ball security, like this season, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we haven't actually been that bad with fumbles. Now, interceptions we've been bad at because, once again, of Tommy and, some bobbled, maybe catches by the receivers and stuff like that. But in terms of fumbling, I don't think we've been too bad.
No, we haven't been too bad. That's correct.
Yeah.
It has been mostly the decision-making and the interceptions and or fumbles immediately after because he hung a receiver out to dry kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's give some predictions here on how this game is going to go.
All right. Well, it's interesting. I've seen some of the early predictions, and a lot of people are predicting a fairly high-scoring game. I've heard a lot of 40-something to 30-something type of scores, and really swinging both ways. I mostly UCLA's, obviously. I think that because of the couple of weeks, teams have had a chance to get healthy, that sort of stuff, and it's a bowl game that frankly doesn't have a lot at stake. I think that the coaching staffs are going to feel free to throw everything but the kitchen sink out there because they got nothing to lose, other than to give things a try. So they want to make sure that their offense looks fun, that their defense looks fun from a recruiting standpoint. So I think both teams are going to be super aggressive, and I expect it to be a high-scoring game as well because of that. I'm going to predict like a 42 to 42 to 28 type of score.
Okay.
And
but to which team?
Yeah, and which team is almost exclusively driven by what the quarterbacks do. Both quarterbacks.
Okay.
But I'm going to say Nebraska. I'm going to be optimistic and say Nebraska.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say up front that like I said before, if Tommy plays like he did in the Iowa game or close to that, we lose this game. It might not even be close. So I'm going to go in with the presumption that Tommy, maybe he doesn't play his lights out, but he plays good. He doesn't make mistakes. He completes passes, what we expect of him to do. If he plays like that, I think we win. And I'm actually going to predict a slightly lower score.
Probably wise.
Presuming that, thinking that our defense will have success against their offensive line.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that ends up being 21 UCLA to 38 for Nebraska.
That's still a dominating victory. It's interesting that we both choose that, because to be honest with you, if you had asked me 2 days ago, I probably would have flipped it. I really would have. It would have been the same score.
I'm going to say 35.
Yeah.
I'm going to adjust mine just a little bit. So I'll go for that.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I am of the opinion that these last couple of weeks hopefully will have given them a chance to get in sync and to really be sharp and fresh, and so they will be efficient offensively. Mm-hmm. Now, both of these teams could come out and just look sloppy as all get out, and it would be a terrible game, But
you never know.
That's why bowl games are so hard to predict. I mean, participated in the bowl mania with ESPN and all these different things, and the bottom line is it blows me away how many times you're completely wrong. I mean, Utah State just got absolutely hammered by Akron, already in this bowl series. What was another one? Oh, Temple played. Who did Temple play?
Toledo.
And Toledo crushed Temple. And Temple was a very highly regarded team all season. Having almost beat. Well, they beat Penn State and they beat some other teams, or nearly beat some other teams. They were in the top
25.
Yeah, top 25. Fabulous season. And Toledo, without their head coach, who went to another job, still comes out and just rocks the world. So you just don't know what's going to happen.
That just brings up, this will be a short tangent, but in that one Tom Osborne interview that we talked about on a previous podcast with that radio show, he got to talking a bit about some of his strategy, and I think who was it? There was a coach who he took advice from,
Bobby Bowden,
in terms of should the players practice during that first week of between the first week after the regular season, right? And Bobby said, no, just let them, go and have fun, and relax a bit, and then they come back, the second week and you start practicing more.
Right.
And Tom did that for a few years and saw his players not play as well in the bowl games. Right. Kind of decided that you did need some, so he said two practices during that first week, and then 3 or 4 by the second, and then by the third week you're back to full practice.
Right. And that was that sounds like not very much, but when your game wasn't until January 1st or whatever, you had a whole nother week, so you were still practicing full on for 2.5 weeks or more before the game actually occurred. And you're exactly right. Tom's point was, with his offense specifically, with a power-based, option-based running attack where so much of it was precluded or established through timing, that it was critical that he continue to have and maintain that timing. So taking a week or a week and a half off, like Bobby Bowden could do with his passing offense, pass-based offense, was not something that worked for Nebraska's power and run option-based offense.
Right. Okay. So now we're going to move on to predicting some of these other games.
Okay.
And we'll start with the playoff games.
Oh, okay. We're going to go top to bottom.
Yeah, why not? Because I have them written top to bottom, so that helps. So the Michigan State-Alabama game, that's a game that is very near and dear to the hearts of the people here in Michigan, where we are currently sitting. And I'm looking forward to it. My heart says, my brain says that Alabama's going to win that game, but my heart wants MSU to win so badly. Mm-hmm. I really want to pick them.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, again, you've got two great defensive teams,
right?
Okay, and you have two offenses that have potential and have been explosive at times, but have also looked and struggled at times. Alabama has certainly struggled at times, and they seem to find themselves late in the season primarily by just being an enormously run-based, power-based offense where they rode Heisman Trophy winner Derrick Henry for 40 carries a game kind of thing, and just let him carry him to victory. And even then, they were still barely winning, in these various games. But they were dominant physically and in terms of time of possession and those kinds of things. And I suspect they're going to try to do that to Michigan State. Now, the reality is that's playing in the Michigan State strength to some extent, because their defense tends to be very good against the run. And their weakness is defending the pass a little bit more. Similarly, Alabama's is the same way. I think, again, no surprise here, the critical thing for Michigan State is, how does Connor Cook play? If all other things happening the way they likely should happen in terms of performance, the decision of who wins the game is going to be based on whether Connor Cook plays like he did at times in big games in the past, where he played at a very high level, or he's been banged up, especially late here in the season. How is his arm? Is his arm
Right.
healthy, and does he have the zip and the velocity on the ball, and is his decision making sharp, or is he rusty and still throwing the ball a little
Yeah.
pickedly,
Yeah, 'cause-
throwing high.
Yeah,
In every game he was throwing high at the beginning of the game.
In the Iowa game, which I watched all the way through, he definitely had some missed passes that were open.
Yeah, well, they were protecting him in the Iowa game. There's no question his arm was hurt pretty badly, frankly, and they were asking him to do only limited things, which is why they kept trying to throw all those little short dink and dunk passes to keep him from having to throw hard very many times.
Right.
Now, no, they've said nothing about the fact other than just he's got a sore shoulder. Well, what does that mean? So I think that's the huge critical thing. I believe that if they come out and Connor Cook plays well in terms of his velocity and decision making, I think Michigan State will give Alabama everything and then some. Okay, and so then the chance for a Michigan State victory is absolutely there. But if Connor Cook doesn't do that, I think Alabama's defense will swallow that offense up whole, man.
Well, here's what I think. More so than does the offense score points when they have the ball, which is obviously still important. But I think even more important than that is controlling time of possession. I think that will be very critical in this game because we've seen in the past that when Alabama when offenses are having lots of 3 and outs, and so Alabama's offense is getting the ball back, defenses get tired out because they're a very physical team, and that's how they've worked with Derrick Henry. He might have very little success in the first half, but in the second half that continues happening. The defense starts to tire out, and then he starts blasting through guys.
Correct.
So I think
it's a 60-minute game.
Yep. So I think that is the most important part of the game because if that happens with MSU's defense, because I think they're good enough that they can hold off that running attack for a while, but if they're driven too hard, eventually they'll break late and Alabama will win. Which is why. So I'm going to go ahead, like you. I'm going to say that Connor Cook does play at least decently well, and executes the offense, and they're able to stay out on the field for a reasonable amount of time. So I'm actually going to predict an MSU victory. I'm going to go for that. I'm going to say, let's say 21-17. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game for sure.
I would agree with you on the low-scoring game thing. And I would have to say that, like you, my heart is very much with MSU. I think they have a very good chance, but they certainly are going into this game as the underdog. And I'm going to need Nick Saban to make some mistakes here. They're going to have a turnover. Their quarterback's going to have to. Their quarterback has not played exceedingly well this year. That quarterback's going to have to make a couple mistakes, and if he does, I think Michigan State takes advantage and wins the football game. A similar score. However, I don't expect that to happen. I expect with all the time that Nick Saban's had to prepare this team and knowing the kind of coach he is, he's never lost to one of his previous assistants, and D'Antonio is a previous assistant under Nick Saban. So I suspect that's going to continue, that trend, and regretfully, I'm going to predict a Alabama victory, 21-17 for Alabama.
All right.
Sorry.
That's no.
MSU.
I mean that. Honestly, part of me thinks that might happen too, but I want my score to happen. So
I
go
get
for
it. I do too.
Oklahoma Clemson, the other playoff game on New Year's Day, or New Year's. I guess it's New Year's Eve, isn't it?
New Year's Eve.
Yep. Now I think this is just going to be so interesting to watch because I think this could be very much the opposite game, a very high-scoring game.
Absolutely.
Opposite of
MSU, it's interesting that the matchups, you've got the two kind of power-based, pro-style, defensive-minded teams in MSU and Alabama playing each other. And then the opposite of that is the high-flying, zone read, quarterback that's athletic, running the football for both Oklahoma and Clemson.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no. So with this one, I'm not sure because Clemson's obviously has been, I feel
Number one.
Yeah, I feel like they've never struck me as being they have all these amazing plays and they're clearly the number one team and they're just blowing teams out of the water. They don't seem quite like that kind of team, but they're just extremely consistent and they don't make a lot of mistakes. And they execute their game plan very well.
Right.
And they have a great quarterback, which certainly helps with that.
No.
And then with Oklahoma, I feel like they've been a little bit more back and forth. Where the Texas loss was a very ugly loss for them,
Right.
but then they have had games where they looked dominant, like they
did.
were the number one team in the country.
Right,
You
right.
know?
And it's all about their quarterback play as well. When they, even late in the year there, they had a game where, their starter played early, and they blew out to a huge lead and were just completely dominant. Then he got hurt, and the other team practically came back and won the football game.
Yeah,
and so they are so quarterback centric.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I believe that Clemson.
I think that was the TCU game.
Yeah, is that what it was?
I think so.
Okay, it was either that or Baylor. I don't remember which. But bottom line is that Bob Stoops has got a lot of history. He's played in a lot of these situations, and Clemson's kind of new to the party. Okay, this is their first foray into this kind of stage. Okay, so you kind of wonder how they're going to handle it, how their coaching staff is going to handle it, that sort of stuff. But Dabo Swinney has shown himself to be a guy that's really grown up and matured as a coach, and his staff as well. So I'm actually going to go with Clemson in this game myself. I think Clemson's just the more complete team. I think that they have more diversity of what they can do, both offensively and defensively. I think Oklahoma has looked great at times, like you say, but then there have been some other times where you just scratch your head. And so that Jekyll and Hyde, that's the part that keeps me away from picking Oklahoma. If they come out and play the way they did at their peak, there's nobody beating Oklahoma.
Right.
But if they even show a half of a game where they're playing that inconsistent football they did at times this year, I think Clemson beats them. So
Okay.
I'm going to go with Clemson, but I'm going to say it's going to be a very close game, like 42 to 38.
42 to 38. All right, I'm going to just kind of for the sake of creating some separation here, I think I'm going to go with Oklahoma. I think it's very close. There's a part of me that thinks that Oklahoma's running game and their physicality is a step above Clemson. I'm not sure if that's reality or just my perception, but I'm going to go with Oklahoma, and I think I'll go even higher. I'll say it's going to be a let's say 52 to 49 victory.
Holy
for
cow.
Clemson.
Holy cow, 100 points scored.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Woo!
I'd love
Wow.
it. That would be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, it would. And then obviously sets up a national championship with that contrasting style. So you're going to have the two similar styles for these semifinal games, and then you're guaranteed to have a contrasting style for whoever wins those two games.
Yes, which I think will make for a very interesting matchup no matter who it is.
Yeah.
All right, so then we have another one of the games, the Rose Bowl, Stanford and Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
This will be an interesting matchup. Listeners know that both my dad and I were kind of down a bit on Iowa, especially after Nebraska played them, because, the only reason we lost that game really is because our quarterback was playing horribly. Mm-hmm. Our defense was holding off their offense, and so they looked kind of like how we thought. They looked like a team that was really good at executing their game plan and didn't make mistakes, but not that exceptional, not having those many explosive players.
Right. Good solid defense with some great players on defense like there's in their secondary.
Right. But then in the Michigan State game, they played with a very good Michigan State game and held their offense back, pretty much almost entirely up until that, big fourth quarter drive that Connor Cook had.
Right.
And then their offense also, managed to, drive against MSU's very good defense and at least get some, field goals and stuff like that.
Yeah. But they got an interception. You start looking back at that Michigan State Iowa game, and they got some, cheap scores. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
Right. So their offense didn't really do all that much against.
Right.
Just like they didn't do much against our defense.
Right.
Right. And
similarly.
So yeah. So what do you think about Stanford?
So basically, what I'm saying is that I have a higher respect for Iowa now than I did earlier in the season, but I still think, especially given the way Stanford played in their championship game, where their Heisman candidate was just absolutely off the charts good, and I don't know if he'll duplicate that kind of performance in this game, but I feel like they are definitely the better team. I'm very confident
absolutely
in that.
agree. So I think we're going to be in agreement on this one. Again, I am not sold on Iowa, and if a team ever just plays at a high execution level and doesn't basically gift them opportunities, I think that team dominates Iowa. And regretfully for the Big Ten, I think this is the case. I actually think Stanford wins this comfortably. by about 21 points. So I'm going to say whatever that would be, about 14 points for Iowa, and what would that be? 35 for Stanford.
35. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say Stanford wins. I'll say it's a little closer because I do think Iowa's defense is pretty good. So I'll go ahead and say it's a 28-14 victory for Stanford. I still think they win. I think Iowa plays with them, through the first half, and then maybe in the second half, Stanford pulls away.
Okay.
Notre Dame, Ohio State, another
great matchup.
Yeah, great game. I'm looking forward to. I do. Part of me wonders with Ohio State, and I know I said this about one of their other games, and I was wrong about it. It was the Michigan game. I was wondering about coming off their loss to MSU and them getting kicked out of the top 4, if that was gonna, cause them to kind of take a step back as a team, and it didn't. And they played lights out in the Michigan game. There is some worry about that here too, because for a team that was, in that the number one team, for so long, there certainly must be some disappointment amongst some of those members of the team that they're not in the Final Four in the playoff game. But at the same time, you're playing in a very big bowl game, and you're playing against a very good Notre Dame team, who they have some history with. So I don't know. I mean, if the players come to play for Ohio State, I think that will be the key in the game, because if they don't, I think Notre Dame wins, but if they do, I think Ohio State has a very good chance of winning.
Right. Well, and I look at Notre Dame's season, and they lost to Clemson in a close one that you could argue they should have won against Clemson. They lost at Stanford, okay?
Right.
And we know Stanford's a good football team, but I look at Ohio State's roster, and maybe I'm starry-eyed, but I just think that they have so much talent and so much going for them, and especially if JT is playing well, then they're a very hard team to stop. And if their running back is running possessed like he was against Michigan, then I think they win comfortably, frankly. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I actually think that Ohio State's going to struggle a little bit with attitude and readiness. I think Coach Meyer's going to do everything he can to get that team ready to go and focused. But I think Brian Kelly and the Irish are going to do the same thing. And they have a young quarterback who's really rising up the ranks right now, starting to get better and better every week. And all this extra practice time is going to do nothing but, increase the steps for him. Mm-hmm. JT Barrett, on the other hand, is a guy that still kind of finds himself in the throes of a battle back and forth with other quarterback, at Ohio State. And I think we've got enough data on JT at this point to know that he has some limitations, particularly as a passer. And if Brian Kelly is able to put his defense together, then it'll be an interesting game. However, at the end of the day, it's still going to be Ohio State that wins it. I think it's just going to be close.
Okay. I pretty much agree with what you said there. Given because I was in a Michigan bar actually when I was watching the Ohio State game, so I got to see the disappointment on their faces as Ohio State was running all over them. So we clearly know they have the talent to have that kind of performance. And Notre Dame's obviously a very good team too, but I still remember, I forget who they played. They're playing like a kind of a nobody team there near the end of the season. I was in a bar watching them, and that was the one where they fumbled the ball like 4 or 5 times, and it was like they really did not look like a
Boston College.
That was it.
Against Boston
and they didn't look like a top 10 team in that game, certainly.
Exactly.
So I think they are prone to some mistakes as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm going to say I think Ohio State wins it, but it's close. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say it's a 38 to 35. I'll go for that.
Okay, I'm going to go 38 on OSU. I'm going to go no. I'm going to go a little lower than that. I'm going to go let's say 35. We'll just go 3 lower. But then I'm going to say 21.
21. So you think it'll be a little more dominant.
Yeah. And so I just have a question. Are you always at a bar now that you're out there in Los Angeles?
Well, on weekends I try to be. Watch the games.
I know.
That's what makes it fun.
I think it's funny.
Okay.
Father-son here. Dad's getting worried.
No, okay, don't you be saying that. You've been telling me to go to more sports bars. If anything, I haven't been going enough for your taste. All right. Oklahoma State, Ole Miss. I think this is an interesting matchup because these are two teams that both definitely struggled mightily in certain games. Ole Miss had some bad losses, and Oklahoma State also has had some. When they went up against legitimate competition, Oklahoma State hasn't looked the greatest.
Right. I want to say a couple of things, though, for you, because you may not know this. Two of Ole Miss's best defensive players are both out for this game. Okay. A dominant defensive lineman and a dominant linebacker, brothers, who are both in problems. Let's just say off the field issues.
Right.
And the loss of those two players to me is going to be significant in what Ole Miss is able to get accomplished here. So I wanted you to be aware of that as you were considering your final decision on your. And so I'll kind of take the lead on this just because I'm pretty sure you didn't know that. But yeah, Ole Miss is a team that has been very up and down. Obviously, beating Alabama, only team to beat Alabama. But if you remember that game, there were some crazy things that happened. A real surprising, bounce of the ball that led to a long reception touchdown that gave them a substantial lead. They kind of caught Alabama flat-footed early. Alabama's secondary is absolutely their weakness, and Ole Miss was able to take advantage of that early. And then Ole Miss had the defense to create some fits for Alabama. And Alabama was still trying to find themselves offensively. They hadn't locked in on that power running game quite so much. And so I think the combination of those two things allowed them to have that early success. But then since that Alabama game, I consider Ole Miss kind of a middle-of-the-road SEC team. If you look at how they played and the victories that they had and what the scores were and just how they performed as a team, I just don't think Ole Miss is all that and a bag of chips. So I believe that Oklahoma State has a great opportunity here to make a statement. The question is, does Oklahoma State show up? Oklahoma State's a team that similarly had it rolling, baby. And then at the end of the year, their schedule was very backloaded with their biggest games, and they fell all apart.
One of two in their games.
Yeah, one of three. Or one and two.
One and two.
One and two
yes.
in those 3 games, yeah.
Yes.
And so I just kind of question whether they have the heart, you know what I mean? So it's an attitude thing.
Right.
So I'm convinced that Oklahoma State's going to win this game because I think Ole Miss is really going to miss those 2 defensive standouts.
Okay. Well, what's your score then for this one?
So I'm going to say it's going to be high scoring because that's what's going to happen with Oklahoma State in the game. So I'm going to say Oklahoma State 45 and Ole Miss 35.
35. Okay. I'm not. Obviously I didn't know that, so I'm not as well versed in terms of information on this game. I'm going to go ahead and go with Ole Miss, though, purely on the point of what you were just talking about, Oklahoma State's heart and the fact that, I watched that Oklahoma State-Baylor game, and I was rooting for Oklahoma State because they were the ones on the previous podcast I had predicted they were going to be the ones to win because I thought with them having the home team advantage and all their big games, that would help them out. But they did not look very good in that game at all. So I think if Oklahoma State struggles, I think Ole Miss can capitalize on that. So I'm going to go ahead and predict a little bit of a lower scoring game. I'm going to predict that Ole Miss ends up winning it. Let's say 38 to 31. Let's go with that.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
But all of those so far, great matchups.
Oh, yeah.
Games with interesting storylines and discussion. Heck, even the Nebraska UCLA game, for being a game of inferior teams, frankly, and Nebraska, as you say, probably not deserving to be in that game and just being lucky to back in. It's actually a compelling matchup, and should draw some eyeballs from college fans.
I think, one of the beautiful things about the bowl game system is it's, capitalistic. The bowls want to get the best matchups, of the teams available that they can. So it's in their best interest to create those dynamic stories, and to choose teams that travel well and all those sorts of things.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting one. Michigan-Florida matchup, another matchup between the SEC and the Big Ten. And with the Big 12 or the Pac-12 and the Big Ten matchup before Stanford, Iowa, I think we both went with Stanford. And this one I'm going Big Ten all the way. I think Michigan, even though they lost badly to Ohio State, I think the Michigan is still a very good football team. And I am not confident at all in Florida, especially their offense. They're just so inept on offense. in their last couple games that I've seen them in. I think Michigan wins this game. I think they could win it big too. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, I'm also going to pick Michigan to win this football game, but there's two things that cause me to be hesitant, and I would say it's going to be a closer game than what you're suggesting. My two reasons are, number one, the game's in Florida. Okay.
True.
And so there's going to be a decided advantage for the Gators in terms of the environment and the comfort level. And having been a Nebraska fan and following Nebraska during all those years when they were tied through the Big Eight with the Orange Bowl, when you go down there and you're battling in that humidity and heat that is often associated with that area, it definitely has an impact on your players. And then the second thing is that Florida is a team that defensively, like Michigan, is one of the best defensive teams in the country. And so they're going to find a way to stop whatever you do well and make you go to option 2, 3, and 4. And I don't know if Michigan right now, in terms of maturity as an offensive system and as a team, has that third and fourth gear the way they will in the near future.
Right.
And I think that Florida now has had a month to prepare for this game and to figure out whatever it is that's ailing their offense, because their offense was doing okay when they had their quarterback. Now their quarterback is gone, and they've got this guy they're going to be living with. Right now they're kind of struggling. They don't have a quarterback that's getting the job done for them. But so I will agree with you that Michigan will defend them well, and I believe Michigan will end up winning, but I think it's going to be closer. So I'm going to suggest to you like maybe a 27 to 21 type of victory for Michigan.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I'm going to say that I agree with you that Florida's defense is legit, that they'll slow Michigan down a bit. So I'm going to say 31 for Michigan, but I think I do not, even with that extra time,
right.
I don't think Florida's offense is going to be able to compete against Michigan's defense that is good.
Yeah.
It's a good defense. So I'm going to say it's a 31-14 game.
I think that's good. That's a good call by you.
Yep. And then the last one, I might be wrong on this. I have Northwestern Tennessee. They're also on that.
That's Outback Bowl.
New Year's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's an interesting game. Northwestern's another one of those kind of up and down teams. Like they looked really good early in the first half of the season, and then they tripped up against some of their tougher games. But still one of the better teams coming out of the Big Ten, to be certain. And then Tennessee, similarly, had some big mess ups in big games as well.
Right. Tennessee's a very young football team. A lot of talent that's young and is maturing and getting better. And so that's the part that, as a bowl game, you wonder what's happening there. My inclination is to often go with a team that has that youth, because the youth is more likely to be listening. And if they're physically gifted but maybe just haven't quite fully figured it out, they're going to make the biggest jump and improvement, right? And Tennessee's just a very young and talented, athletically talented football team. They've recruited very well. Northwestern has recruited well, but not to the level of Tennessee. Right. Northwestern's a better coached team, in my opinion, than Tennessee at this point. But I think Tennessee is going to out-athlete them. And this is one of those things where the Big Ten SEC matchup falls in favor of the SEC, in my opinion. And even though I very much would like to see Northwestern win this football game, and I'm fond of Northwestern's football coach, I think that happens regularly with his teams, they run up against a juggernaut they can't quite match athletically, and they lose the football game. But in a heartbreaking kind of fashion, they'll hang in there, they'll find ways, and then Tennessee will get them in the end. So I'm going to say it's going to end up being like a 27 or 28-24, type of victory for Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm thinking similarly. I think Tennessee does have the edge athletically, and I do think Northwestern's good enough to hang with them. This is one of those games I could see going either way, but I think I'm going to lead towards Tennessee as well. I'll go ahead and say I'll go a little lower. Why not? I'll say 24-21 victory.
Okay. Very interesting. So we were similar in many ways, just a couple that we flip-flopped on, like the MSU Alabama game, and then Notre Dame Ohio State, I think, was also one we flip-flopped on a little
Well,
bit. Nope, we're just different scores.
Yeah.
So
different
okay.
scores.
All right. So, but bottom line, though, is what a great slate of games. I'm curious to get your immediate insight into the whole process. This is year 2 of the College Football Playoff Committee and their decision, which influenced pretty much all of those games except for the Nebraska UCLA one. So all of those we just went through. That slate was pretty much created as a result of the work of that committee. What do you think about how they're doing that? Do you think there's some flaws that are starting to get exposed, or do you still like what they're doing?
I mean, the only thing I would really say was that I thought Iowa was overrated. I didn't think they were the number 4 team in the country. Even though they had wins against top 25 tier opponents and they hadn't lost, obviously, up until the Michigan State game. I thought that they weren't. I mean, I thought like Notre Dame, and some of those Ohio State, some of those teams that got ranked a little bit below them were better than them.
Well, and that's based on your eye test, you believe.
Right.
But when the team like Notre Dame has 2 losses and is not playing a conference championship game, how do you, going into that, situation, how do you choose any differently than they did?
No, I mean, I agree with that, and I guess that gets into that question of like how much the eye test should matter, which versus the other things, which the eye test is the one that's hardest to gauge because that's not a statistic. That's just, people's impressions of watching the games and stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, overall, I'm definitely very happy with it. I think it's made for some great matchups. Part of me was kind of wondering, obviously the reason that Michigan State ended up jumping to that number 3 spot, they jumped to number 3, and then Oklahoma was number 4. And I went into the reasons why I thought that was, a good choice, I think, on the last podcast, because Michigan State beat a very good Iowa team, and Oklahoma didn't play anybody that week, so it kind of makes sense for MSU to jump them. Part of me wonders, though, how much of that was them trying to create compelling matchups, because like we've said, now we kind of have this interesting, power-focused team matchup versus this spread team matchup, and then
the guy who represents the committee, who is the Arkansas Long, his name is, who's the Arkansas AD, absolutely clearly indicated that was not at all what they discussed. That did not even come up in any of their conversations. Now, whether or not that might have influenced the vote of the individual members of the committee and they didn't verbalize that to anybody, there's certainly always that possibility that they were thinking in terms of those matchups. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's certainly possible, but I don't think it's likely. I think they were pretty forthright in their discussions and their dialogue, because they have to be. If they're holding back those kinds of subplots, I think that other weird things would be happening too. So I'm of the opinion that they really didn't do that. I think you genuinely look at Michigan State's body of work after the conference championship game, in which they beat an undefeated Iowa team that was ranked whatever they were, 3rd going in, or 4th, was a much more compelling victory than any victory that Oklahoma had achieved. So when you start to look at Michigan State being a team that had 1 loss in the last seconds to Nebraska, versus who was an ugly loss, certainly, but no more ugly than the Oklahoma loss to Texas. And then you have this combination of beating Iowa and beating Ohio State. That's huge at Ohio State, I believe, too.
Right.
So I mean, those 2 victories had to loom large in terms of just the resume part for Michigan State. And then Michigan State was playing with, frankly, a backup quarterback, and they beat Ohio State. And then they played their starter hurt. It was obvious that he was hurt. I mean, anybody who knows football knows that they were kind of protecting him.
Right.
So for all of those reasons, I think it was easy for them to move Michigan State ahead of Oklahoma. I don't really think it necessarily. It frankly created the matchups that maybe are interesting to talk about. Although I would have loved to have seen the opposite. I would have loved to have seen Oklahoma play Alabama, because we've seen that a few times recently, and Oklahoma beat Alabama badly. So it would have been a bit of a rematch game in a major bowl for Nick Saban and Bob Stoops. So there would have been tons of storylines that way. And so I don't know that they had to do anything to manipulate that matchup.
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with teams of that caliber, any matchup you come up with will be compelling in some way or another.
Right. I actually, to give you a quick summary from my perspective, I think this college committee process has worked out extremely well. I've liked the way they've done it. I like the way they kind of throw out everything from the previous week and try to revisit everything and not have a memory of the previous week or project what's going to happen in the future weeks. But they also have to look at, so what it says to me is being undefeated still matters a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Conference championship games are going to continue to matter a lot. And so, the Big 12 is still going to be compelled. It sounds like they're on their way to getting the rule changes to allow them to do that with the NCAA, assuming some other little catches don't get in the way, which frustrates me a little bit because I think if I'm a Big Ten president or athletic director, I'm not happy about that because of the history that the Big Ten had to go through.
Right.
And not because of Nebraska, because Nebraska wasn't part of the Big Ten during that time. It's irrelevant to us. But for those that have been in this conference a while, I'd have been pissed. But other than those possible NCAA things on the horizon, I think what they're doing and how they're going about it is outstanding.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely happy with it, and it is, created compelling matchups here at the end of the season, like we just talked about, and it's great that, we look forward to it. On
Every
Tuesday,
week. Yeah.
You watch that selection thing, and you get to have Jeff Long, right,
Yep.
is his name, come on, and the ESPN guys ask him questions about, okay, why did these guys shift, and you actually get to hear a human response to that versus, the old BCS way of doing it, where it's, all these computer
Computers,
polls and the other polls combined together.
Right, and
Yeah,
it's all black.
Right. It's nice to be able to hear that, and that creates some discussion and diversion because, not all humans agree, obviously.
Right.
There's that eye test thing. So that comes into it too, but it's nice that to have like a human face, they can say, okay, X, Y, and Z are the reasons why these two teams shifted.
And you can disagree with it as much as agree with it, but at least you know their logic and what caused them to arrive at it.
Transparency.
Exactly. And what you hope is that the messages and the things that they hold in high regard stay consistent over time. And so far, I feel like they've done that. Now each year is different, and it kind of depends. I guarantee Iowa was a difficulty for them. It was very much a difficulty for them, much like last year's Big 12 championship situation was a very difficult thing for them to filter out because of the things that they had identified as a priority. And as long as Iowa kept winning, it was hard for you to ignore the fact that they were playing against a soft schedule and weren't beating teams of top 15 variety. They won the games that were in front of them, right?
Right.
And so at some point you have to start giving them credit for that, and that's what they did. And then they let the games play out, and as likely, or I shouldn't say likely, as what normally happens, they got beat. Right. Somewhere along the line, they eventually had to face somebody. Right. And they got it done when they lost to Michigan State.
Yep. So, I'm very happy with the committee, and I hope that it continues this way and that it stays at 4 teams. We've had lots of discussions about that, like how, I think we talked about this in the last podcast, but we don't need an 8-team playoff because the conference championship games are essentially our pre-games, our first round of the playoff.
Right. In many respects.
Right. Which is
the
why
exceptions are the Big 12.
Right.
And Notre Dame.
Yeah. An independent, obviously, like Notre Dame. But, I think that's what's great about the conference championship games. If the Big 12 were to pick one up, then that would become even more so of a truth.
Right. Absolutely. Well, exciting here the next week or so. We're going to have lots of great football to watch.
That's right. Yep. We're going to be definitely doing a podcast sometime after the Nebraska game to kind of break down what ends up happening there.
Right.
And we'll obviously do podcasts on the New Year's games after they're over.
Right.
Talk about our impressions of what happened, and then we can kind of preview the national championship game as well on that podcast.
Bingo.
So, if you guys out there enjoy this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes. We're College Football Throwdown. We're also on Podomatic. We're footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. You can find our podcast there. You can give us ratings and reviews.
Like us so that you'll get reminders about the next time we do a podcast.
Yeah, subscribe to us. You can leave comments on the page if you want to talk to us directly. We always love hearing from you guys. So thank you for listening out there, college football fans, and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.